If you're hopelessly addicted to porn, this video is for you. Now, before we get into this video, how do you know that you're actually genuinely hopelessly addicted to pornography? Because a lot of people think that they're addicted, but they're not really truly addicted. Well, the way that you know if you're addicted is if you can't go 90 days without doing that thing, you are addicted. You are addicted. So if you can't go 90 days starting today without consuming pornography, you are hopelessly addicted. But by the end of this video, you will have all of the hope and faith that you need to overcome your addiction once and for all. Bearing that in mind, before you can figure out how to overcome your addiction, you need to know why you're addicted in the first place. So I want you to imagine a movie. You've probably been to the movie theater before, and if not, you've watched movies on Netflix or just in general. So just think about not even one particular movie, but every movie that you've watched. Every movie that you've watched has followed a particular pattern. This pattern is known as a plot. So there are different elements of the plot. The elements are the introduction, the rising action, the climax, the falling action, and the conclusion, the resolution. Well, whenever you watch a movie, is it true or is it not true that generally the climax, which is the most exciting part of the movie, corresponds with the conflict? Is this true or not true that the most exciting part of the movie is when the conflict is at its greatest, the tension is at its highest? And you start wondering, man, I don't know if this person is going to get past that. I don't know how they're going to get past this obstacle, this barrier. I don't see it. That is when you're at the edge of your seat. And right now, with you being addicted to pornography, or as I like to call it, PMO, with you being addicted to that, the chances are you are at your climax right now. Now, you have various different plots throughout your life. This isn't the only story arc that you will have in your life. But for the story arc that you're in, you are currently at that climax point, which means that you are dealing with the most conflict you've dealt with throughout this story arc. Now, how does this correlate with pornography addiction? Well, it's simple. Porn addiction serves as a form of escapism. In other words, instead of leaning at the edge of your seat and getting invested into this story that you're living out, you're leaving the theater. Or at the very least, you're trying to leave the theater. You're looking down at your phone. You're mentally leaving the theater. And yet when you look up, the movie's still playing. Because you can't escape your life. There's only one way to escape your life. And I would highly suggest that you don't take that path. You know what I'm talking about. Because you don't have to take that path to make a real escape. And we'll touch on that later. But you need to understand that you are using pornography as a form of escapism, very likely because it is the most accessible form of escapism that there is. Some people like to use alcohol. Some people like to use drugs, maybe weed, cocaine, whatever. All of those things cost money. And so at a certain point, you no longer have access to them because you blow all of your money doing those things. But with pornography, if you have access to this video, you have access to pornography. Or at the very least, you have access to softcore pornography via social media, via OnlyFans, so on and so forth. It's free 99. It's free, it's instantly accessible. You have an infinite supply of instant gratification, and because of that, you will never overcome your porn addiction. Unless you apply all of the principles that I'm about to teach you. So bearing that in mind, how do you overcome your porn addiction? Well, it starts when you start asking different questions. You're like, Jordan, what do you mean by that? Different questions. Whenever you watch a movie, if you've watched enough movies, at a certain point, you start to notice the pattern, which is that the protagonist who is going through the conflict, who's going through that climax point, always makes it to the resolution. Tell me what movie you've watched where the protagonist didn't make it to the resolution. And if you can tell me a movie that you've watched where that happened, then I can show you a movie that probably didn't do very well as far as the box office ratings. Because this is the story that people are drawn to, because that's the story that most accurately reflects reality. We always overcome the conflicts, and the reason why we know that, the reason why we can say this with so much confidence is because we're here. I'm here filming this video, you're here watching this video, which means that you've overcome every conflict that you've ever encountered up to this point in your life. Bearing that in mind, you have to start asking yourself different questions when these conflicts arise. Instead of asking yourself, will I get through this? Or even worse, making a statement such as, I can't get through this. Start asking yourself, how will I do this? And furthermore, how will I feel once I get through this? How will I feel when I overcome this obstacle? And by the way, the obstacle is not your porn addiction. Your porn addiction is simply your way of avoiding the actual obstacle. Perhaps the obstacle could be that you're struggling with women, or maybe it's that you're broke, or maybe both. I've been that person before, various times in my life. And because of that, I was hopelessly addicted to pornography at one point, until I started asking myself different questions. I started asking myself, how am I going to feel once I get myself out of this situation? How am I going to feel once I'm no longer living in my car? How am I going to feel once I build my brand back up and I no longer have to stress about the things that I stress about right now? How will that feel? And when you start asking yourself different questions, you start getting different answers. The reason why you don't have the answers that you're looking for is because you're not asking the right questions. So start asking questions that will naturally elicit the answers that will help you get past the conflict that you're currently dealing with. And at that point, you can utilize escapism in a more productive way. What do I mean by that? Well, again, you're trying to escape from your reality. And that's actually fundamentally a good thing. The problem is that you're trying to escape temporarily rather than permanently. Let me repeat myself just in case you weren't listening. The problem is that you are trying to escape temporarily rather than permanently. In other words, instead of seeing the movie through to the end and then leaving the theater satisfied knowing that you completed that story arc and you can go on to the next one and watch the next movie, you're sitting there looking at your phone trying to avoid what's in front of you. You're ignoring reality. You're watching videos on YouTube that entertain you rather than educate you. You're watching videos that make you feel better for the day rather than making your actual life better so that you no longer need that escape. In other words, when you watch videos that educate you, that inform you, when you make a conscious effort to consume content, to consume information that helps you build a better life, you don't need a temporary escape because you're making a permanent escape. You're making your way to that resolution. And not only that, but you begin to romanticize your story because you understand that all of the adversity that you're going through right now is going to serve as a reference point for your future self whenever you go through that next conflict, that next climax. You'll be able to build on the momentum that you've generated by overcoming the obstacles that you're currently facing. You see, I know now, since I was able to pull myself out of the depths of hell where I was living in a car, $27,000 in debt, to not necessarily being rich, but being far from broke in literally just a year and a half, a year and some change, which, by the way, the year and a half was going to pass by whether I took those actions or not. The fact that I know that I did that gives me the confidence of 1,000 men. As a matter of fact, the confidence of 162,000 young men like yourself, at least at the time of me filming this video. I'm confident because I've overcome obstacles. And in the same way, when you overcome the obstacles that you're facing right now, the ones that you're using PMO to ignore and try to escape from temporarily rather than permanently, when you make that mindset shift and you make that permanent escape, even when you encounter obstacles in the future, which you will, you'll be able to scale them simply because you know that you're capable of doing so. Now, all of this sounds good in theory, but I would be remiss to give you this motivational speech and not give you a practical step or a resource to help you actually put all of this into practice. That said, if you're truly serious about overcoming your PMO addiction and you want to leave lust in the dust for good, starting today, right now, within the next 15 minutes at that. Click the link in the description to get the PMO Relapse Recovery Guide. The PMO Relapse Recovery Guide is a short ebook that I wrote to help young men who are in your exact situation. It's the ebook that I wish I had when I fell off the wagon a couple of years ago, shortly before I ended up living in my car. And with this ebook, which by the way is free, it's completely free of charge, no shipping and handling, no taxes, no hidden costs at all, literally free. With this ebook, you can avoid all of the suffering that I went through in order to gain the information that I'm passing forth to you. In other words, you get all of the lessons with none of the losses. If you're ready to leave your lust in the dust for good, click the link in the description and get the PMO Relapse Recovery Guide today.